Coming up on this week's episode of TechSNAP, a zero-day vulnerability as Microsoft scrambling, and the banking hack that only requires a nice jacket. Then it's a great big batch of your questions, our answers, and much, much more on this week's episode of TechSNAP. Hi everyone, and welcome to TechSNAP. This is episode 128 of Jupiter Broadcasting's weekly systems network and administration podcast. We stream this episode live on September 19th, 2013. This episode is brought to you by our two fine sponsors, GoDaddy.com and Ting.com. I'll tell you more about those sponsors as the show goes on. And our live stream is powered by the incredible Scale Engine over at ScaleEngine.com. You got to go check that out. My name is Chris, and joining us every single week is our host, the admin, the tech, and the teacher, Mr. Alan Jude. Hey there, Alan.
Hey, Chris. Everybody. Thanks for watching.
Hey, Alan. I'm excited because we're doing two shows this week, this is right now peak energy level of Chris. And as the show goes on, we'll kind of dip down. By the time we start the next show, I'll be like, hi, everyone. Welcome to TechSNAP. And then by the end of it, I'll be back at peak level again. I'll get my second wind. So if you want to stick around to a third show, we could. I'm betting. Maybe ask me again at the end of this recording session.
Yeah, probably not.
So we ended up with a big show, though, because we kind of over-prepared and ended up with a whole bunch of stuff to cover, and it worked out for everybody's advantage. And we got a whole bunch of emails, huge feedback sections in both shows. So maybe we should just kick it off with our first news story. What do you think?
Yeah, it's like I had so much stuff bookmarked. Like last week, there wasn't enough time to cover all the stuff, and then it's like there's so much stuff.
Has it been a super? I mean, because look, we should probably say. You're leaving you're going to be gone next week, but we were going to have a show pre-recorded for you guys. We just won't be live. And you're going to?
EuroBSDCon in Malta.
You and Chris Moore, right? You're both going to be there.
Yes, we're both going to be there.
And so you even pre-recorded a BSD Now.
Yes, we did. We recorded an interview with Devin Teskey on Saturday, and we put that together as an episode that we recorded yesterday.
Good. Boy, so that's a lot of work.
Yeah.
A lot of work. I know, and now I might take off next week.
And, this week's BSD Now has an interview with two of the developers from OpenSMTPD, which required me to get up at 6 in the morning on a Sunday to record the interview. So you better appreciate it.
Wow. Everybody better watch that one, because Alan,
normally, just to give you a gauge, 6 a.m., most people are like, that's not that early. But I normally get up around 11 on a Sunday. So that was a big deal for me.
Oh, man, I haven't had a Sunday off in a long time, except for last weekend, because we pre-recorded last. And so since we're pre-recording next week's TechSNAP, I might go out of town Thursday and Friday. So I might get a little time out too.
Yep.
All right, well, so.
Let's get going.
A lot of things to cover this week, and one that is, it's going to apply to either an older demographic, I believe, or if any of us have family members who would be in this demographic. It sounds like it's sort of taking advantage of people who aren't very tech-savvy. And as more and more government services go online, it's probably going to be more and more of a problem. So what's going on?
So people, the Social Security Administration, which is people that give out the old age benefit or whatever you call it in the States.
Do you guys actually call it old age benefit up in Canada?
Yes.
That's so, I don't know, like blunt.
Direct?
Yes.
Well, that way you know what it is. It doesn't have to have a fluffy name.
Like Social Security Administration or retirement benefits.
Well, we call it social insurance.
Okay.
Instead of Social Security, but it's the same thing.
Okay.
Anyway, so they've switched now so that you have to use direct deposit. They don't mail checks except for a few very specific exemptions. And that makes sense because it reduces the amount of postage and stuff and just paper. Why waste all the paper? But because previously there had been quite a bit of fraud where, a bad actor would convince a bank to start sending somebody's direct deposit to the wrong account. So a lot of banks have gotten away from allowing you to make the change at the bank and make you go to the Social Security Administration. So they set up a website where you can just go online and change your benefits to go to your bank account or whatever. The problem with that, though, is that if you have not registered on the SSA's My Social Security web portal site, someone, if they had all the details of your identity, could sign up on your behalf and direct the money to the wrong account.
Yeah, so this seems to be the tricky thing, because if it's tied to your Social Security number, what would prevent me, if I figured out what your Social Security number was, going in and creating an account on your behalf?
Right. So in this case, the security researchers that are discussing the problem say that you should go and register your account so that you control it, because otherwise some bad person could claim your account. Although that seems to underscore fundamental flaws in the way the system was built rather than anything specific. Slips in the chat room asks if this is Canadian. No, we're talking about the U.S. Social Security system, not the Canadian one. At the end, I have a note about how the Canadian one is different in the security system they use that solves most of the problem. But anyway, so they added the way so you can log into your account on the SSA website and change what account your money goes to. In this case, it seems that since or as of August 23rd of 2013, the Social Security Administration has received 18,417 complaints about people fraudulently having their benefits stolen.
These would all be people that would be at retirement age. I mean, that's what's sort of kind of
a lot of these. Not everyone would have to. The Social Security Administration pays out to also people with disabilities and.
Oh, true. Yeah, I guess it could be. Yeah, that's.
It's not only people that are retired.
Correct.
But a lot of people, this is how they survive, right? It's a social safety net.
Yeah.
They say that there's no suggestion that the SSA system has been compromised, right? That somebody hasn't compromised the system and is just redirecting anybody's money. They're just committing identity fraud and registering on the site as the person and changing the destination of the payments. Banks usually alert customers if the account that the SSA payments go to is changed, but that often is sent, in the regular mail. And if you're not expecting it, you get a lot of junk mail, and most of it you just throw away, right? Mm-hmm. And it's almost like, if you got that same email from your bank, there's just as high a probability that the thing you get in the mail was a scam as it is the thing you get in an email.
Right. I mean, especially if I'm interacting with this new online service and everything I'm doing is through a website, and the whole point is to reduce paper and get me to go online. I would not actually expect for a red flag to come to me via the mail. I would expect it to be some sort of electronic notice.
Right, but you don't want to trust a service either. But anyway, so this is the bank separate from the SSA.
Right.
They're like, hey, we noticed that you're not sending us your money anymore.
Yeah.
Did you mean to do that?
Yeah.
But yeah, he says many customers overlook such notices. So they say if you receive direct deposits from the SSA but haven't yet registered on their new web portal, you might want to do that just so someone else can't do it on your behalf.
Right.
Because it's possible to create to create a Social Security account just by having the Social Security number and registering, that's how you would do that.
I guess
apparently they're going to implement some additional security measures, but
I guess you could make the case this is the argument for the national ID, right? That way I can verify that you are Chris Fisher and that is you creating an account.
How is it doing it other than having a number that's like your SSN but different?
It's got to be some sort of, I don't know, some sort of...
Is it going to be like a smart card? Because what about the people that are, using a computer at a library that's old and doesn't have a smart card reader?
I don't know. I mean, there's been talk of almost like a driver's license for the internet.
Right, but again, if it's just some number, it can be stolen just as easily.
It'd have to have some sort of way to do some sort of authentication token, or like a, I don't know, maybe like some sort of RSA code. I don't know what they would do.
Well, we've seen the RSA get hacked and those codes get broken.
Right, on anything at that scale would be a huge target.
Exactly.
Yeah, I don't know. That is, but we are at the beginning of a lot of these services going online. So this is going to be a big problem.
So Canada has had something similar that I use in two different ways. I have the business version for filing our sales tax returns online. And then there's also the version I do for my income tax and so on.
Sure.
And they've combined all this into what they call my tax account or whatever. And so when you go to register for it, you put in all your details, including your social insurance number. And then it will be we would what was the number you wrote on this random line of your tax return in last year?
Okay, so something they have on file that they knew when they verified it was
but
you.
Something it's fairly obscure. It's not even the just your income level. It's some random specific line from your tax return, and you enter that, And then to activate your account, you know how normally you register and you get like an email you have to verify?
Yeah.
They do the same thing, but snail mail. You get sent this, authentication token in the mail. And you have to enter that into the website before you can start using the account.
Okay. And I guess that's a pretty good system, and pretty much everyone already keeps all their tax records, and this is just more incentive to keep them. And since we're requiring something that people are already kind of keeping, it's kind of ingrained into us to keep that.
Yes, like you're supposed to keep them for 5 years anyway.
Right. So you can pretty safely assume they'll have it, which is a good system too.
Yeah.
You Canadians. Next you're going to tell me you've got health care.
We do.
All right, Alan. Well, any other thoughts on that story?
That one, not really. It just seems that they need to implement something so that some random person that happens to... Like, I don't know what the sign-up form looked like and what information they take in addition to just the social insurance number, but, it was a grade 10 programming assignment to write the code to validate social insurance numbers, right? So it's fairly easy to just generate random ones and try them until you find one that wasn't taken and then steal their money.
Yeah, that's very true.
Whereas, to pull off the scam, with the snail mail, there's still the possibility. Like, if you happen to know specifically you're targeting, the old people across the street, you can go through their mail or whatever.
Yeah. Huh. I look at it as definitely a problem where the technology is just not quite there with the right answer, and then you combine that with a generation, or probably predominantly a generation of people who are not super savvy. This is really kind of where, like, the TechSNAP audience kind of has to step in and just, take your family member and help them.
They went further. It's like, we've seen a lot of malware specifically targeting online banking.
Yeah.
We might see one targeting the Social Security Administration website. I don't know how theirs works if, people are logging in every month or something. Probably not.
Curbs on Security on his blog said that maybe take a family member under your wing and hook them up with a live CD.
Yeah, that's what I was getting at. Is he talked about using a live CD so that you can do certain things securely, even if the machine is full of malware. If you're booting up the live CD, then that way that system, it's read-only. It's going to be fine. Although the problem with that is eventually the browser on there is old and out of date.
Yeah, it's almost one of those things where the technology is not ready for us not to be hands-on still with this kind of stuff. And I've had family members. Oh man. I have had family members who got a new machine and within the first week had junked it up with malware. And it was just like...
Plus the crapware that comes on it.
Yeah, big time. All right, Alan, well, should we take a break right here?
Sure.
Okay, well, coming up, we've got some great, more news stories and in the feedback and the roundup. But first, we want to thank our first sponsor this week, and that is GoDaddy.com. Now, GoDaddy has rocked a new look. They're rocking a whole bunch of new features. They're making some big moves. There's a lot of energy around GoDaddy right now, and it's pretty exciting. If you've been watching the scene, you know that they've been making some big moves for business, for group collaboration, and I have also got some great deals to go along with all of it. In fact, if you use our promo code TECH199 when you check out, TECH199, you get a .com for $1.99. That is crazy. That is really kicking it up a notch. I think what GoDaddy's got going here, when you look at their options now to help you roll out a mobile site, to manage it via mobile, combine it with their great apps, combine it with their group features, their new clean look, and that code TECH199, I mean, holy cow, now is the time with the holidays coming up. Anything you might need to get done, take advantage of this super special offer from GoDaddy.com. The world's #1 domain name registrar, Jean-Claude Van Damme says, kick your business up a notch. I specifically went to the GoDaddy front page because I just wanted to see if they had a new picture of Jean-Claude, and they do. And he's doing my favorite, you know what, hold on, Alan, I got to look this up. Now, one of my favorite Jean-Claude Van Damme movies is Time Cop. So let's just see if I can find this. Time Cop, Jean-Claude Splits. I just want to show you this picture.
And that's every advertisement is just him doing the splits. It's like, really?
It's kind of all about his butt now that I look at it in retrospect. I wonder why that made such an impression on me. But anyways, I got to show it to you because it's so awesome. He's really got, like, look at that. Look at that. Look at that man do the splits. Look at that. Now, you go back over here to the .com page, go to their main GoDaddy.com. He's still got it. He's still got it. I cannot do that. I cannot do that.
I could never do that. So
turn it up. Go over to GoDaddy.com and use the code TECH199 when you check out. And thanks to GoDaddy for supporting the TechSNAP program for such a long time and keeping us on the air. And thanks to you guys for taking advantage of our codes like Tech199 to let our sponsor know that it is important to you that they keep us going. So thanks to GoDaddy.com for sponsoring the TechSNAP program. All right, Alan, I hear your Cherry MX keyboard over there. That could mean only one thing. We must have another Internet Explorer 0 day on our hands.
Probably.
What's going on?
So Microsoft's warning that there's a 0 day that affects all versions of Internet Explorer.
Convenient.
And they're working on a patch for IE 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11 to address the problem.
Wow. You know, this is one of those things where this seems to happen more with IE than any other browser, where it's a whole swath of versions.
Well, you know, usually, for example, in Firefox, it would affect all previous versions of Firefox, or what was introduced later. Yeah, they just don't support the older versions. Microsoft, because of the way it's integrated with Windows, means that IE 9 won't work on Windows XP, so people can't upgrade from IE 6.
Right.
And so on. So anyway, the flaw in question makes remote code execution possible. If you browse to a website that has malicious content on it, it can run a program on your computer. And in addition to sites specifically designed for malware, they send you a spam, you click the link, and it takes you to a website that infects your computer, right? If you try to get free weasels. But at the same time, we've seen advertising networks getting injected with this, so that you can be on a completely legitimate site and get infected. We've seen watering hole attacks where they've compromised, a forum or something that all the Apple iOS developers went to. And get them that way, or
what I always think happens way more than anybody talks about, and maybe this is because I'm a bad person on the inside, but to me, if I knew that my company mandated that everybody use Internet Explorer because of some crappy web app that they have to use, and then I got mad and I wanted to get them, I mean, I could take advantage. I mean, it could just be something small scale, like I infect 35 people's computers, or I send a link to the boss and I get something on his machine. I mean, to me, this seems like the more common exploited kind of aspect of this. It doesn't really get talked about very much, because that's like, oh, well, I could do that. Everybody in my company does this. Right? I mean, that seems that must happen.
Right. Well, I don't know, but this is like a real 0 day that's finding a use after free programming error.
So it's out already on the net.
Yep. The reason Microsoft was reacting so quickly to this, rather than just releasing a patch quietly, is that it's actively being exploited, and they're still working on the patch.
I gotcha.
So yeah, apparently it's a use after free vulnerability in the set mouse capture implementation of MS-HTML.dll in the Microsoft Internet Explorer version 6 through 11. So using a specially crafted JavaScript string, you can use an ms-help URL to trigger loading some other DLL and run whatever code you want.
Good old run a DLL trick.
Yep. The vulnerability exists in the way that Internet Explorer accesses an object in memory that's already been deleted or was never properly created. Right? They're using an area of memory after they've told it to be freed.
Yeah.
So who knows what's left in there?
Yeah.
And so the attacker can put what they want in there and then cause Internet Explorer to use it. And so an attacker could host a specially crafted website that's designed to exploit this vulnerability through Internet Explorer and convince the users to go to the site, and they would get infected, or hack a site and inject the code. We saw the Syrian Electronic Army did that with an advertising network that's on the Washington Post and CNN and a bunch of other sites, right? And all they injected was a redirect to make your browser go to a different page.
Right.
But they could have just as easily used this exploit to install a virus on every computer using Internet Explorer. And this is, even if you're fully patched up, you have all your Windows updates installed, you have virus scanners and everything running, it'll still infect the computer.
Do you think that, it seemed like we got to a point with Java vulnerabilities where we were like, okay, time to just stop using Java in the browser. You can keep Java installed, but don't use any toolbars that use Java. Don't have the browser plugin turned on if you don't need it. And don't even install Java unless you have to have it. Do you think, are we there with Internet Explorer? Have we been there with Internet Explorer? Or, because here's why I ask.
I don't think it's still fully possible to completely get rid of Internet Explorer off a computer.
Right. And in fact, we actively have.
And most of these attacks are always not against the browser part of Internet Explorer, but like the MS Help HTML engine that should have never been part of the browser.
Right.
It was part of the OS.
Or the mouse
right?
DLL they haven't updated in 15 years. No, I guess
Yeah,
so.
or ActiveX.
But
right?
we have people probably in our chat room even right now that choose to use Internet Explorer. Like,
Right. If you choose to use it, you should be slapped.
I mean, isn't it time to start? I hate it when we shame people in IT for using certain things. But like, at what point do we just start saying stop it? Stop making your apps require an Explorer. Stop using apps.
Well, when you work in a Microsoft shop, then you use the .NET tools, and they make stuff that only works in Internet Explorer.
We're seeing the
Microsoft ecosystem.
So this is the long-term downside to vendor
right, but
lock-in.
we've known that since ActiveX became a thing.
I don't know.
Ages ago.
Have we considered this as always considered this as like a side effect of lock-in, that you are then exposed to that platform's vulnerabilities, not just the limitations or the resource usage or whatever?
The only reason most places still use Internet Explorer is because they have some app that doesn't work without it.
Yeah, like usually something that requires ActiveX or something.
Yeah, or even just something that was written and is never maintained and updated to work with browsers that are better. I don't know why apps are still written that way ever.
Yeah, well, like MerkX in the chat room is saying right now that the only browser available for the government-run network at work is IE. It seems like if you're at a high-security operation, that one of the requirements would be that it doesn't use IE.
Yep.
Wow. So there are potential workarounds, right? Temporary things you could do.
Yeah. So Microsoft has a fix-it solution where you can download that. Is the MS-HTML shim workaround.
Yeah.
That's supposed to prevent the exploitation of this specific issue. However, the Krebs site notes that it only works for 32-bit versions of IE.
Oh.
So that won't help most people on newer computers.
No.
They also say set your internet and local intranet security zone settings to high to block ActiveX controls and active scripting in these zones. Configure Internet Explorer to prompt before running any active scripts or to disable active scripting entirely. And eventually Microsoft will come up with a proper patch. And their fix-it solution, if you check the URL for the fix-it solution, I imagine they will realize that it only works for the 32-bit versions and post a fix-it that works for 64-bit ones as well.
I'm sure we'll get a patch after the NSA's contracted window of opportunity has passed. I keyed. But I'm sure actually they'll hopefully, since Microsoft is kind of making us think about it right now and providing a fix-it solution, I'm hoping that means that we'll see it in the October Tuesday updates.
Hopefully,
because that's coming up pretty soon. So if you got an IE shop, watch for the Tuesday updates.
Yep.
Any other thoughts on that one?
No, just Internet Explorer is bad.
Yeah. I just got done ranting.
The joke since I was in college at 2004 has been that Internet Explorer is the best browser for downloading a better browser.
I just did a rant on Linux Unplugged that we shouldn't shame anybody for whatever tech they use because they probably choose it for some practical reason. And I don't want to do that with IE, but I also want to just put I just want us to get a stigma out there about it, just to get people.
Right. Well, using IE is one thing, but using the proprietary parts of IE that won't work in another browser.
That seems
right?
crazy.
If you just like IE, that's fine. But if you're building an app and you're using some feature that's IE only, that's bad.
To me, I'm sure you will not agree with this statement, but I probably get a lot of hate. But to me, it almost seems like we have more to thank to iPhones and Android devices and iPads and tablets for breaking the IE monopoly than we actually do thanks to Firefox or Chrome. Not that it would have been possible without Firefox and Chrome, but those things were out for years and years and years, and the dial never really moved much on the gauge. And then all of a sudden, tablets break free and iPhones break out and Android devices, and now all of a sudden you start to see this mass exodus away from IE.
We also end up seeing sites that work in Internet Explorer and iOS, and that's it.
Yeah, that's no better.
Yeah.
Or if you come to our website, download our app, you can't use the website in the mobile. I hate that.
Right.
Yeah. That's no
Whereas the CBC News site is would you like the mobile version or the full version on your phone? Because your phone has a good browser and can do either. But do you want the simplified version that's easier to read, or do you want to pan and scan and zoom and just use the full website? I had a point though. I forget what it is now. But yeah, I would say that mobile has done more to get people to stop building IE-only sites than the other browsers ever did.
That was where my last long-term contract came from. Was the company was an IE-only company. They used ActiveX finally after years, like when years of pressure. They caved and supported Firefox on Windows using a Firefox plugin that essentially wrapped their ActiveX plugin inside Firefox, right? It was like this total hack. And then they just cruised like that for about 10 years, like, I mean, not the Firefox part, but like the IE only for like 10 years. And then tablets come out, and a lot of these contractors they were working with went from these old, wretched, like the 1.0 laptops from Compaq, that were like running Win98 SE. They went from those immediately to tablets with LTE because that solved their internet connectivity. They could view their drawings on the project work site, and it was a long battery life. And then all of a sudden, like in mass numbers, they started getting all these calls. Well, how come it doesn't work on my tablet? And an IE-only site that was like that for 10 years had to like rewrite. And so hopefully all of these sites that are locking people in IE will die a horrible death. Maybe it'll just take a little time.
Because I remember I had a Windows phone back before I had my Android.
Is this the newer Windows, or you mean like the old school Windows?
Like 6.1?
Yeah, so like CE kind of stuff. They called it Windows Phone.
Right, but
it
was the later one that was better. Yeah, it had a start menu, I think. It was the later one that was better than some of the earlier ones. It wasn't like the... you remember the ones that used to come on those HP PDAs?
Yeah, man. I had an HTC one of those.
Yeah. I had a HTC Touch was the phone, and it had Windows 6.1, and it came with Internet Explorer that didn't even support style sheets.
Yeah.
So you go to a website and you would get the text. So their solution to compatibility was just let you look at the text.
Yeah, this was one of the reasons why I think the Windows Phone. Yeah, that was a good one. That was a good Windows Phone because it came with that cool HTC clock and stuff. That was good stuff, Alan.
My main thing was it wasn't considered a smartphone. You paid $10 an internet for flat unlimited, or $10 a month for flat unlimited internet because it didn't have a real web browser.
Yeah.
But it could run Pocket Putty, the SSH client, and edit a Word doc if you wanted. But mostly it was I could SSH to my servers from the phone. Using a stylus and a horrible tiny keyboard.
Looking back at this phone,
that was all I really wanted.
I don't remember if it was quite like. I remember here in the States there were certain phones that were quote unquote not smartphones but had like a smartphone OS, and you could cheat the system a little bit by getting that functionality without having to have some of the mandatory packages that they'd make you have.
I remember I had it was called Fennec. It was this really, really very early beta of Firefox for mobile.
Really?
Yeah. And it's like, hey, I can actually look at a website on my phone.
Yeah. Those were crazy times. Those were crazy times, which does actually bring us to our next sponsor. And that, my friends, is Ting.com. Ting is mobile that makes sense. Now, Ting is my mobile service provider. And you look back at some of the tricks, you still have to pull some of the tricks with the big boys.
Oh, yeah.
In fact, Big Red was in the news just this week laughing at Google, Facebook, and Microsoft for being consumer-centric in fighting the NSA requests. Did you see that? Did you see this?
Who's Big Red?
I don't. The big mobile provider here in the States. I don't even want to say their name.
It's Red?
They got a red logo.
In Canada, the red logo means Rogers, which is different.
I'm talking about red. I'm talking about never mind. Anyways, I was very unimpressed, very disappointed as a consumer, and as somebody who kind of stays abreast of the news and these kinds of things. This is where Ting is extremely different. So Ting is, first of all, they have a very active blog where they are very transparent about their business. They're often frequently answering questions in Google Hangouts. They have active social media accounts where you can actually ask them a question about your service.
Do you want to know the key to why they're so nice?
Canadian.
They're Canadian.
Yeah. I know. I can't even deny it. Like, I talked to him off air, and they are like the nicest people ever. And so you Canadians really got it figured out. Must be that healthcare. Yeah. No contracts, no early termination fees. Why would you want that? You don't want that. I don't want that. Of course, Ting knows you don't want that. And of course, no bundling of ride-along services, no overage penalties. You just pay for what you use. Ting will add up your minutes and your megabytes and your voice and all your datas and all of your texts and all of your bits and your bytes and all of that stuff. Puts it in a bucket. And at the end of the month, you just pay for what you use. Mine has always been extremely low. The average Ting monthly bill is $21, and of course you can have unlimited Ting lines. It's just $6 flat rate, and then you just pay for what you use. So if you want to have a family with 3 or 4 phones on there with a low rate, it's very easy to get going. And I want to tell you a little bit about some of the great deals that Ting has. So not only is Ting rolling out an early termination relief program to help you get out of your contract, they'll pay up to $75 if you have to terminate a contract, but they've got some really, really great deals on used devices right now. And I sometimes mention these. If you're going to get a few phones and you want something off contract but still very high quality, they've got a refurbished Samsung Galaxy S2 for 208 bones. That's it. $208 for an off contract, Samsung S2, white or black, $208. That is an amazing deal. They also have a Ting personal shopper, so maybe if you're going to get a few phones for the holidays, you could fill this form out, and they'll find them for you. And of course, they've also got some great deals on brand new devices. I noticed they currently have a $102 off deal on the Samsung Galaxy S3 16 gigabyte. That's a great deal too. Plus, if you go to TechSNAP.ting.com, you can take $25 off your first device, make it even a better deal, or $25 off your first month of service if you want to bring your own device. And if you're thinking about trying Ting out and you're a bit of a gearhead, you want to see what people are talking about, check out some of their active user forums. You can go over to help.ting.com, and they have people in there that they even have a section on their forum called hacking. Now, how about that, right?
Yep.
And that's pretty cool. And there's people that maybe sometimes try a few things that are outside the box, but people are always sharing stuff. Plus, one of the great things is their powerful online control panel and their always available customer service. If you call between 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. Eastern, just call 1-855-TING-FTW, and a real person will answer the phone. Probably within the first ring or two. It's pretty awesome.
Yep, it's amazing.
And it's great if you have a friend or family or in your small business, you got a team, and you don't want to have to be the person that every time they have a phone problem, they have to call you. Just have them call Ting, and they'll take care of it. And honestly, I'd be pretty surprised if they couldn't just take care of it through the really easy-to-use control panel. So
it's gotten to the point with my family that I tell them, I only work with Unix servers. I don't know how to remove malware anymore, and I don't know anything about phones.
I know, right? I know. Our conversation, our conversation around our first story, it really is like you become the family IT person, and that scales for like my mom or somebody, or maybe my aunt, or maybe like 1 or 2 people, right? But as soon as you get like grandma and grandpa on there, you get the uncle, you get the mom, you get a whole bunch of people. It does not scale, and it takes up all your time. And when you got a great service like Ting, you can just point them over there and say they're going to take care of you. So have them go to techsnap.ting.com.
The biggest thing is you can trust them not to just sell your grandmother some ridiculous package she doesn't need when she calls.
Right. Yeah, no, Ting will work with them to help them figure it out. And if they're having any troubles transitioning, if their current mobile provider is being a bit of a jerk, Ting will help them with that too. And I've gotten stories, we get people that send in their experiences with Ting, and I've had people say that, my mobile carrier was not releasing my phone number when I tried to port it, and the Ting representative stayed on the line with me while I got it worked out and made sure that everything was working before we got done. And I keep hearing all of these great experiences, so I want you guys to go check it out. Go to techsnap.ting.com. And thanks to Ting for sponsoring the TechSNAP program. Love my Ting phone. I'm always checking out the Ting blog, too. I recommend you guys do that as well. If you're a Ting customer, it's kind of a cool way to see all the neat stuff they're up to. I like that. I like finding out what my cell phone company's up to. Okay, Alan, we move right along from the woes of Internet Explorer and, of course, the Social Security Administration to a cyber police arrest. Boom, boom, boom.
This one's unusual because, the first story we were talking about people using the Internet to steal money.
Yeah.
And so when you hear the cyber police arresting some people trying to rob a bank, you assume it involves the Internet.
They're cyber.
But in this case, it's not as specific as you would think. So the Metropolitan Police, which is the police in England, London anyway, their Central E-Crime Unit, the PCEU, has arrested 12 men as part of an investigation into an audacious plot to take control of the Sandhester banking computers.
Oh, they must have been using like sophisticated malware combined with phishing attacks and custom targeted landing pages to fool people into clicking.
This is what you expect when you hear this story. But no. The PCEU has committed to tackling cybercrime and the damage it causes to individuals, organizations, and the wider economy. According to the police, the group sent in a man dressed as a maintenance engineer who managed to attach an IP KVM, which is a KVM stands for keyboard video mouse. Basically, it's a little unit. You plug keyboard and video mouse into it, and then you can hook up multiple computers usually.
Yeah.
And it allows you to use one workstation to control multiple computers. Or there's IP KVMs, where you hook up the mouse, the keyboard, and the video, and you hook up the mouse and keyboard and video from the computer, and you also hook up an Ethernet jack. And now, in addition to being able to work at the local station with the mouse and control the computer, you can connect over the internet and control the computer. I have this on almost all of my servers, and I can even go as far as installing the OS on a server in the Netherlands from my house using this technology, right? So they, dressed as a janitor or a air conditioner repairman or some kind of repair person, walk into the bank and hook this up to a computer nobody was watching. And then they could connect over the internet or Wi-Fi or however they hooked it up. They weren't very specific about it. They could then control that computer as if they were sitting at it.
Hey-o.
So it's instead of using software level malware, they have a hardware level solution
where console access.
Yeah, so they can just wait until some person logs into the computer and then take it over, right? And they can see everything on the screen. And depending on the type of KVM, they might even have been able to capture the keys, right? Because the keyboard's plugged into this KVM, so you might be able to use it as a keylogger as well.
You could definitely,
or you could just
the BIOS.
log into the computer and install the malware by purposely doing it, right?
Reboot it in a single user mode.
Yeah, but you just install malware on it by downloading the malware and running it.
True.
Which normally you couldn't get the user to do. Maybe the bank manager's savvy and knows not to click on links that come in spam emails. So you just take over his computer and install it yourself. But anyway, so they were going to use that to remotely access the bank's computer and steal money. The men ranged in age from 23 to 50, and all 12 of them were arrested yesterday, and they're still searching addresses in Westminster, Hounslow, Hillingdon, Brent, Richmond, and Slough for more evidence.
I got to be honest. As far as bank attacks go, this is how it's done. First of all, you see this jacket I got on? This jacket, it lets me in anywhere. I just walk right in, and it just takes.
Just look like you know what you're doing.
Exactly.
And you know where you're going.
And I know that sounds like, oh, that's what everybody says. No, it is so true. And the reason why I can tell you this is because I had to overcome this awkwardness of being a contractor. First of all, when I worked at a bank, we had 44 branches. So frequently, nobody at the branches had any idea who I was because there's turnover, and with 44 locations, you don't go to many of them all the time. So sometimes it'd be the first time people had ever seen me, and people are kind of paranoid about it. So what you actually do to put other people at ease is act like you belong there, act like you own the place, right? And then as a contractor, I'd show up at a new business, I'd have to go in underneath people's desks. I got to act like I belong there. And when you got a clipboard, you got a jacket, you look official, you act like you belong there. It is ridiculous where you can go, and it's because people are like shy almost. They don't want to say anything.
Yeah, they don't want to be the guy causing a problem.
Yeah.
Or, questioning things.
Yeah, and for all they know, like if you look professional, maybe you outrank them for even, so they don't want to go up and get you in trouble. So I love that. Like this is exactly the kind of stuff that the cyber police need to be going after. But yeah, when it's a cyber police taking down a cyber heist against a bank.
So the real question is, how did they catch these guys? Did somebody notice the KVM? After somebody was like, what, this extra thing's hooked up? Was it hooked up incorrectly and all of a sudden the guy's keyboard didn't work? It seems like they got tipped off somehow.
Yeah, good point.
Although, it also seems like the group was overly large. If you're going to commit a crime, 12 people is probably too many to be involved.
Yeah.
But, bank heists usually, it requires a number of people with different skills.
Could be a good amount of money, too.
Yeah.
And maybe it's a group. Maybe you're going after a group of things.
Right. You really got to try to keep the group small, because otherwise somebody talks and, if you have a big group, you're just, once more than two people know, it's not a secret anymore.
That's right. Very good, Alan. Well, we've got links with more coverage in the show notes if you guys want to check that out. Also, I just want to remind you, we have links at the bottom of the Jupiter Broadcasting website. You click those before you shop at places like Amazon or Netflix or Newegg or ThinkGeek or Best Buy, and they'll help out the network. I got some big plans for 2014. Hey, Alan, imagine next time you visited, if I had a place with a room. I don't want to get into details, but let's just say big plans at the beginning of 2014. I think I've actually talked to you about them before. And so I I'm kind of laying the groundwork now, and if you'd like to help kind of kickstart that investment, now this isn't like a full Kickstarter project, but one of the ways you can help us build up our war chest for this is by using the links at the bottom of our website before you shop, and also grabbing our browser extensions, which will auto-tag your shopping session for you. And we have them in there for Chrome and Firefox. In fact, they were just recently updated and do require that you reauthorize them, at least on Chrome. And then you don't have to worry about it. You go to Woot, you go to Newegg, whatever it might be. What's the other one we love? Monoprice. Freaking love Monoprice. Yeah.
My whole house is wired with Monoprice.
Yeah, pretty much the whole studio. It's all in there. So thanks to everybody who supports out our network by using those links and using those browser extensions. We really appreciate it. Al, with the news all done, that means it's time for the TechSNAP feedback. Thanks for sending your emails to TechSNAP@JupiterBroadcasting.com or pop in that contact link at the top of our website, or even better, starting a thread in our subreddit over at links.techsnap.tv, which I don't have any from this week. All right, Alan, well, why don't we get to our first email? I think we actually have them next week. It came in from Steven. He's pretty worried, and he wanted to send this into the Plan B show, but the Plan B show has been on hiatus, and he needed an answer quick. So the backstory on this, because he sent in hell of an email, quite long. But what happened, unfortunately, is there's this popular website called Listen to Bit. Oh, look at that. Look at all those go in there. Lots of bubbles. So there's been this popular website called listentobitcoin.com where the author would take Bitcoin transactions from the blockchain, read them, and then visualize them using JavaScript in the form of bubbles. And the different bubble sizes would mean different sizes of transactions. Different tones mean different sizes. Well, what happened was the author ended up with a very popular website on his hands and sold it.
Yep.
And this is going to happen more and more. So it's been interesting to watch this in Bitcoin as these new Bitcoin services get popular. Sometimes the way these guys decide to cash out isn't by putting ads on. It's by selling to somebody else for a really good price, no questions asked. So I talked to the author who sold this website back when this happened. I was going to interview him for Plan B. He opted not to go on air. But what he told me was that it was a deal that was too good to refuse, no questions asked. I handed them over everything, and of course the code was up on GitHub, so he started a new site, and the people who bought this put up malware on the site. Mm-hmm. And nobody knew. There was no new management sign that went up anywhere, and then people got infected. Well, so our emailer Steve is one of the folks who was infected. And he's kind of concerned about it. He said, unfortunately, I visited listentobitcoin.com before I realized that it contained malware, and he went under Linux and Windows. He says, and I'm not quite sure what malware was present on the site, or if it was cross-platform. I've run malware bytes on my Windows system, and everything appears to be fine. But without knowing what type of malware it was, I'm not sure to be safe. Now, this was one of those things where the browser, it was the built-in browser service was coming up and saying, Chrome has detected that this site has been flagged for malware. It didn't get very far. And I think Steve's pretty freaked out by this, probably because he's concerned maybe about somebody getting to his money.
So if he got the Google Safe Browsing Service warning, saying that Google's detected this site has malware, so that stopped him from ever going to the site, so he didn't get the malware. So running malware bytes and not finding anything seems fairly conclusive.
Yeah, he's wondering, is that good enough? I mean, that's the core of his question is how do I know?
It comes down to your definition of good enough. Like, how much do you care?
Yeah.
Or how many Bitcoins do you have?
Yeah.
And so on.
Yeah, if you got $10,000+ worth of Bitcoins, maybe it's worth a wipe.
You should just wipe the computer. Yeah.
If you got $50 worth of
and
Bitcoins,
like, flash the BIOS and everything if you're really worried about it. But it basically comes out of your level of paranoia and what's considered good enough. If the malware scanner didn't find anything and you're pretty confident you didn't actually get the malware because the Google Safe Browsing Service in Chrome and Firefox stopped you from visiting the site, then that's probably good enough.
I guess if you wanted to be really safe, if you're gonna keep very much in terms of Bitcoin balance on your computer, maybe you do it on the Linux box, or something that's not a Windows box, because then you're just reducing some of your exposure.
A live CD where the Bitcoin wallet is on like a USB stick, so it's still writable, but everything else is not.
Yeah.
And then that USB, or even if you're doing it on Windows, but if you could keep your wallet on the USB stick and then have it disconnected when you're not using it, it's air gapped. People can't steal the wallet if it's not connected to the internet.
I like that. Good luck, Steve. I think you're okay though. If you've wow, look at all these transactions. These are neat. This listen to Bitcoin is a cool concept. It's an interesting way to be able to take the blockchain and derive something kind of neat from it. All right. Question comes in on FreeNAS and mounting. It comes from Matt, and he says, this is for Alan, being the FreeBSD master. Okay, I have a FreeNAS Mini Plus from IX Systems. I think that's the same rig I've got. It's running FreeNAS 9.1. He's got the i5, 2.9 gigahertz, 16 gigs of RAM. Man, that's a rockin' FreeNAS box. So here's this question, or actually it's more of an issue. I am unable to mount the NFS share from the FreeNAS box on my Ubuntu 13.04 laptop. If I run mount as my user, I get mount. Airbag says mount. Only root user can do that. If I run it as sudo, then it hangs and never mounts, even if I have it in my FS tab. And he gives his line that he has right here in his FS tab.
Right. I'm not that familiar with the NFS client in Ubuntu, but that line would be invalid in FreeBSD because the word auto doesn't.
Oh yeah, that's good. That's legit.
Because normally in even like the documentation I found for CentOS, that's supposed to be a list of the flags you want to pass, like RW.
Right. So let me go look at mine.
I don't know.
So
for mine, when I'm doing NFS mounts, I pass the flags soft, which makes it not error out as hard. INTR, which makes it interruptible, so you can use Control-C to cancel it, whereas if you don't put that, it will hard freeze and not do anything until the mount works again. And BG, which makes it go into the background, so if it's not able to mount, it'll go into the background and try to mount again continuously until you unmount it.
So here is, let's see if this is my, here's my FS tab line. Looks a lot similar, it looks very similar to his. I also have auto in there. Now here's one thing that I'm doing differently. Is I'm running the mount command as root. Mm-hmm. However, in my mount options, I'm saying user equals 1001. So I'm saying mount it as my Chris F user, even though you're executing the mount command as root. So that way all of the permissions are set to that
on
user.
On FreeBSD, you're not allowed to mount anything if you're not root, unless there's a specific option, vfs.usermount is set to 1. Then you can mount as long as you own the directory you're mounting it to.
The chat room notices my foul language for my paths. I couldn't help myself. It helps me. It helps me memorize the paths if I use dirty language. It's a flaw.
I'd also check for error messages on the FreeNAS, like in the system log. There'll probably be an output saying why it's not allowing that NFS mount.
Yeah, I would.
'Cause, like by default for NFS, you have to specify a list of addresses you allow that mount to be connected from, right?
You know
like in all mine, I have it restricted to only certain IP addresses can connect over NFS.
You know what? I will pull up my FreeNAS 9.1 box right now, and I will answer that question for you if I remember where it's at. So if I go into, let's see here, I think it's under, it's under services, I think.
But again, like I don't know how he set up the Ubuntu box. Like I don't know. Like on FreeBSD, you have to enable like RPCD or RPC bind.
So
and
by default, you don't have. No, by default on FreeNAS. It's allow non-root mount is checked. Allow non-root mount requests to be served. This should only be specified if there are clients that require it. It will automatically clear the vfs.nfs.sovray.nfs priv ports sysctl flag, which controls if the kernel will accept NFL requests from reserved ports only. So I have that checked on mine, and I don't have any of the bind ports or any of the bind IP stuff specified.
Right, but what about normally? Like in each share, you can specify.
Oh, okay. Let me check.
What IP ranges are allowed to access it?
Right, Alan. Right. Let me see.
Part of this is for me is because I have servers that are on the internet and on a LAN, and I want to make sure that NFS is only accessible over the LAN.
Yeah. So when I look at my fart mount, that's what /mount/fart. That's where I'm sharing out via FreeNAS. It's pulling up right now. You know what? I did put an authorized network in there. I did.
Right. So he might want to make sure that his LAN, the IP address he's connecting from on the Ubuntu box, is in that authorized list.
And then the other thing I did, just to make it a little bit easier, is I made it so that way when anybody mounts via NFS, now this just happens to work for my setup, is I have a specific user that they mount as, and that user's UID matches the UID on the client systems. So that way all of my file system permissions are the same across all of them. Everything is set for user 1001 across the board. Makes it a little
The
easier.
chat room is saying that in addition to the auto, they should add common defaults for NFS to make it work.
Common defaults. Comma defaults. All right, there you go.
Right, so the flags would be auto, comma defaults.
Yeah.
Because on mine, the flags on my NFS mount are RW, comma BG, comma INTR for interruptible, comma soft, comma no A time because I don't want access time, so there's no writes when you're reading.
I will add mine because he's doing it from an Ubuntu 13.04 box, and I'm doing mine from an Ubuntu 12.10 box. So I will add mine.
Same.
Yeah. So I will put my FS tab entry right into the show notes.
Okay.
So we can go look at that. All right. Good luck to you, Matt.
Yeah. The chat room asked if your next Z pool will be called Burp.
It's probably going to be butt-oriented because I have 3 kids, and that's kind of the inspiration for some of that. Maybe diaper. I don't know. We'll see. So Tashara writes in. He says, "Hi, Chris and Alan." He says, "I saw a TechSNAP 127 yesterday. And about your piece on the iPhone fingerprint scanner, I, too, initially felt that it was mostly just a gimmick, but today, at the gym, I realized that every cardio equipment has a pulse rate monitor, and I'm assuming that they are pretty cheap, too. If you combine that with a fingerprint reader, you have yourself a fingerprint reader that can be operated only by a human." Actually, so he goes on to kind of speculate a little bit before he gets to his next question. So I read up on it, and I guess the fingerprint reader in the iPhone 5S scans the top layer, and then it has an infrared imager and scans the subdermal layers, and if you have a chopped off finger, it doesn't work. So there's that. Which also means...
Well, I've heard similar things, like my APC BioPod had the subdermal scan so that your fingerprint would still work if you had like a
burn,
a scratch or a cut on your finger.
Yeah. Well, that's good.
Sometimes you get a cut on your finger.
So they also say that means it doesn't work, so that means, so the ones that do subdermal also don't work by like faking it out with a picture or something.
Possibly.
They're more sophisticated.
Although lots of them claim things like that, and then the Mythbusters fooled them anyway with Jello.
Don't you think, like, over the next several weeks, we're going to see, like, iPhone 5S bypass, blah, blah, blah.
There's a Kickstarter project or something called, like,
I put it in the roundup,
is Touch ID hacked yet?
Yeah. There's a website?
Yeah, there's like a bounty. And people are chipping in money, and whoever cracks Touch ID will...
Yeah, so I this might have been the story I know. So far, no. But yeah, there are people. Wow, look at that. Holy shite. There's a lot of money being... Well, I put a link in the roundup. We're going to talk about that, too.
Yep.
All right, so here's his question, though. It says, what are your views on hardware RAID versus software RAID? To my understanding, hardware RAID depends a lot on the firmware and the RAID controller. Given that firmware upgrades are more difficult and dangerous than upgrading software on your computer, it makes more sense to use a software RAID instead, right? Would love to hear your thoughts on that subject. Love the show. Keep up the good work.
Well, it depends what you mean by software RAID. ZFS's software RAID is good. Depending on the other stuff, some of the other ones aren't so good.
Like, yeah, when ZFS came into town, it was pretty obvious. Okay, now it's time to just get on board the software RAID train, right? And then when you're on the Linux side, I know I always get heat for this, and I've used a lot of systems with soft RAID. I kind of still prefer a hardware RAID solution.
It depends. Also, FreeBSD has all of the options, right? You can use the hardware RAID. There's also software assisted or hardware assisted RAID, whereas it's software RAID, but the BIOS knows about the metadata format. One of the problems with software RAID is if you say have mirroring set up, right? You mirror 2 drives, right? Well, your BIOS is set to boot off the first drive. If that's the drive that dies, it doesn't try booting off the second drive. Right? Mm-hmm. And you'd have to go into the BIOS and change the setting to make it boot off the second drive, which doesn't work so well if it's a server in a data center far away.
Yeah. So
there's this hardware-assisted RAID where the BIOS can read the software RAID configuration and will try all of the drives in the mirror set, or RAID Z or whatever, or not RAID Z, RAID 5, depending on the support of the BIOS. But it means that the BIOS is aware of the software RAID and will boot one of the disks that's actually working. Which is handy. I think the FreeBSD supports like the Intel storage matrix and a couple other options. But in general, yeah, the hardware RAID is good, but sometimes it's not worth the extra money.
That's true
and
too, huh?
It also depends. Hardware RAID is like, is it real hardware RAID, like a card with a processor on
and
it,
a battery,
or is it just the little feature built into the motherboard?
Right. Which probably maybe even uses the CPU.
Yeah.
That's two very different things.
So, when working on that handbook chapter in the previous DDI, it's like, wow. So we have software RAID, like, you know, in FreeBSD you have gmirror and gconcat and all that. And then you have the hardware-assisted RAID, where it's software RAID where the BIOS knows about it.
Right.
And then you have, you know, motherboard RAID, where it's like, you know, it's just a feature of the South Bridge or whatever. Mm-hmm. And then you have real hardware RAID. And it's like, and there's different terms for each of them, and it's like most people consider motherboard RAID to be hardware RAID, and it's not, and it gets all kinds of things.
Si, senor. All right, so it's just the best tool for the job in this case.
So yeah, it comes down to, if it's ZFS, you want, just give ZFS the raw drives, because then it can deal with the problems. Otherwise, the problems get masked and it doesn't know what's going on. If you're just doing, you know, if you just need to mirror some drives and you don't want to spend money on a controller, then software RAID's okay. Although if you can get the hardware-assisted software RAID, it means that if the disk that's your boot volume dies, you can still boot up the system will still boot properly by using the second member of the mirror. Whereas if you don't have the assistance from the BIOS, that might not work. And, you know, if it's your local computer, that's one thing. But if it's a server in a data center where it's kind of a pain to go reconfigure the BIOS because you don't have access, you know, you have to pay somebody remote hands rate of $100 an hour to reprogram the BIOS for you, that's an issue. Mm-hmm. Plus, you know, it's down until somebody can do that, or that you can figure out that's what the problem was.
And the other nice thing, I mean, so the hardware RAID for me, I guess, so for me, the hardware RAID, I come from a period of time where there was such a dramatic performance with hardware RAID that it was just so obvious for depending on your workload. But I'll tell you, there's a lot of nice things about software RAID these days, and it's absolutely a viable option. All right, should we move on? We got a series of questions. Bastian knew that we were going to do an extended feedback segment, so he packed it. He packed it for us. First one is, what kind of setup do you guys recommend for a web server, starting with OS from everything on top of that? Any difference in software setup for a site with, say, 5,000 users versus 500,000 visitors per month? Start there.
In general, yeah, for us, if it's one site, then I would always recommend using like Nginx as the web server or whatever. But if you're doing a web hosting server where you're going to host a lot of sites and some of them are going to be admin by people other than you and they need, you know, rewrite rules or whatever, then you'd use Apache. But, you know, when it's one site, I'd recommend always using Nginx. If for the OS, I prefer FreeBSD, but, you know, all the tools that work on either, mm-hmm. you know, you can use your favorite Linux if you have to.
I think we'd probably just both say ideally not IIS, but even with 5,000 users, you could do IIS, really, if you just...
You could, but no, don't do that.
Yeah, don't do that.
He asked for a recommendation on OS, so...
Yeah, there you go. You want a recommendation, don't do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, if it's just the one site, Nginx is better, but if you need, you know, all the features of users being able to make rewrite rules and stuff, Apache's easier. If you have those extra users, then you need a control panel. I like DirectAdmin. Most people like cPanel. I have a very crude name for people that use cPanel.
Oh, he also wanted to know about, like, you know,
if you're going to have the 500,000 users, I probably would stick Varnish in front of the Nginx as a caching layer, or you can, that works in front of Apache as well.
He's also asking, you know, questions about key factors and securing it. Things like that. Like if you guys like if there was like I think what he's looking for is like a couple of like big notes on securing a web server, like must-dos.
Right. You know, if it's Nginx, then it runs as an unprivileged user after it listens on port 80 or whatever. What I do is, for, you know, the sites that I run, like JupyterBroadcasting.com, are PHP based. So I have the fast CGI PHP FPM that executes all the PHP code actually runs in a jail, and it runs as an unprivileged user with an NFS mount of Chris's site, and it's mostly read-only. Mm-hmm. That way, you know, nothing bad can happen. And if they do compromise, you know, if some WordPress vulnerability gives them a shell, they're stuck in a jail that doesn't have anything in it. And they're stuck as a user. See, like in a traditional setup, every user's PHP code runs as, you know, the user www-data or something, right?
Whatever Apache
Whereas
runs
in
as.
our setup, each site has its own separate username. it's a lot more work to set up, and it doesn't scale well. Like the amount of work to set it up doesn't scale if you're going to have more than a couple of sites. But we just host a couple of really big sites, so we have a completely separate user executing the PHP for each site. So it allows us to make it so that if you get a shell in as the JBroadcasting user in the jail, you can't access any other site's data at all either. So it prevents that cross-contamination. Again, not something you have to worry about if you're running just one big site.
Mm-hmm. He says he goes on to ask if there's any really server-side stuff for HTML5 in terms of software, but not necessarily. Here's a question that I thought would be just a kind of a good one to just touch on. He says every now and then we hear of massive hacks or breaches. He said, could you make a segment in the show devoted to just for tips on how to make your servers networks more secure? And if someone will be hacked, it will be their fault if they didn't listen to TechSNAP. I look forward to your advice, seriously. Now, here's what I wanted to say about that is I think this is sort of this is probably a wrong way to look at security. It is.
Yeah, it's the biggest misconception is that there's some way to be absolutely sure you'll never be hacked.
Yeah, and if we recorded that episode next week, it would be out of date in a few months. I mean, really, it does not take long for this stuff to evolve. So really,
well, for example, one of our customers runs the vBulletin app.
Yeah,
and they make sure to keep up with all the patches so it doesn't get hacked.
Yeah,
but there's a 0-day exploit, and it took a week before the vBulletin people even admitted that there was an exploit, and took longer for them to make a fix for it.
Yeah,
and so in the meantime, someone was able to add themselves as an admin user to this forum and make a match.
Ouch. Well, that's no good. I mean, this kind of stuff is changing all the time.
Rather than, you have to take what steps you can to prevent a breach, but you have to also take the steps to be able to recover from one as quickly as possible, right? You need very good backups, very consistent backups. You have to make sure they're happening. You have to test your restore plan. You have to have plan for everything.
And I think,
and isolate as many things as you can so that if they break in through
like
a people
you do with the different users.
If they break in here, that they don't have access to anything else.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why this is...
The toughest thing with web apps is that there's really no way to hide the database credentials.
Well, yeah, right? Because it's got to be written down
somewhere.
Basically,
the username and password to get into the database have to be in plain text in a config file so that the app can connect to the database. And there's really no way around that. And that's the biggest problem.
I think you got to stay informed, and that's why we have a show like TechSNAP. It's a weekly show. It's not a one-stop shop. It is keeping yourself updated. It is, Alan covers the news at the top of the show.
Trends.
We kick it around. Yeah, you'll often pull out this is something new they're doing. This is a new approach. This is a new method. This is a new attack. And so it's a continuing evolution of, all right, well, now that we know they can do this, what's theoretically a way we can defend against that, or what's something these people could have done to prevent that from happening to them? And it's through that kind of watching and dialogue that you just kind of
right, because every time we come up with the defense, they have to find another way in.
Yeah, exactly. So they're a bunch of wily bastards. All right, the next email comes in from Clayton, and he's got a question about the Raspberry Pi. It's been a little while. He says, hello, Chris and Alan. I've been watching TechSNAP and Last for a while, and I enjoy the shows. I've even started watching Unplugged. I am a senior in high school, and we have a self-taught programming and system administration course. I'm secretly working on a project for my work as both a test to learn the framework I'm working on and a potential kickstart to my future programming career. To be honest, my project, I was thinking, is a system with 2 Raspberry Pis and 2 separate client networks, a dynamic IP address, non-business account. The system that I plan to use would, through a small handwritten program, allow each of the Raspberry Pis to check on each other. Obviously, the DNS name record would only point to 1 Raspberry Pi at a time. I don't expect traffic to be high or have any attacks, as this would only be used by employees and potentially occasional random script kiddies. This is why I would think that a 2-server Pi solution would work. Furthermore, he goes on to say that his questions are, would a Raspberry Pi be good enough for low traffic, acting as a web server, maybe hosting something like Apache with some small scripting? Any suggestions for free SSL certs? And would you think this is a viable solution to have 2 Raspberry Pis that talk to each other, maybe hosting a small amount of users with a web server and scripts? Any thoughts on the power of that?
With the Raspberry Pi, you don't have very much RAM, so something like Nginx instead of Apache might be better, just because it uses a lot less RAM. Although you can tune Apache somewhat, but The biggest thing is Nginx uses very little, and then if it has to execute some PHP, that happens in the PHP process. With Apache, if you're using mod PHP, PHP is loaded in as part of Apache, and each worker has that, even if it's only serving a JPEG file. With Nginx, serving a JPEG file happens in Nginx, and it's it can use a 20 megabyte footprint of memory to serve 10,000 concurrent users.
Yeah, that's nice.
Whereas Apache can't. Well, if you reconfigure it and use fast CGI and stuff, you can get it down some, but it just has so many more features that it can't be that small. Free SSL certificates? No, there's no real solution for free ones that are trusted by everything. Yeah. Use our coupon code and get the cheapest one you can from GoDaddy.
Yeah. So, his idea, though, is the Raspberry Pi.
So he has Raspberry Pis at 2 or more locations, and he wants, high availability between them?
Yeah, essentially one kicks off, the other one kicks in.
Right. Rather than writing a custom thing, you might consider using GDNSD, which is the thing we use at Scale Engine to automatically stop sending traffic to a server when it's down.
There you go.
I gave a talk on how to configure it at EuroBSDCon last year. It's on YouTube.
Have you heard of the trash can data center?
No.
So people are taking like Raspberry Pi type units and slapping solar panels on the top of the trash can, and they're calling it a data center in a trash can, and they're pitching it for like large conference events where you would have some machinery outside that you needed to do things, maybe host Wi-Fi or whatever. You put them in the trash can, you put a solar panel on top, and they're pretty much self-sufficient, and they form a mesh network.
What if it's a rainy day?
Oh, Alan.
What if the conference is in Canada and it's snowing?
Or Seattle and it's raining?
Yes.
Yeah.
And
oh, Alan. By the way,
Rotten Corpse, that's a great title.
According to istouchidyhackedyet.com, no, still not hacked. Not yet. Of course, the phone isn't out yet.
But the bounty is looks like it's up to like $15,000.
Yeah, I know. Okay, all right. We got an email in about contact sync solutions. Remember, this had come up recently. It's like, hey, if you...
Yeah, someone asked about how to do it.
Yeah, if you kick the Google habit, or you want to roll your own IMAP server, what do you use for contact syncing? He says, and this is from Eduardo. He says, hey, JB, last show you talked about how to sync contacts without Google. Here's how I do it. OwnCloud provides a way to sync contacts through CardDev and to sync calendars and tasks through CalDev. This is how I got rid of Google Drive, Google Calendar, and Google Contacts and Google Tasks all in one shot. Nice. OwnCloud's really awesome. Yep. It is just not quite there for me. I've run into a few issues, like I added back-end storage and the performance just died on me. But I have gotten several emails.
Well, what are you running the OwnCloud on?
It's a decent box. It's like I had a quad processor. And
right, well, the processor is not really
like
what's going to be affecting your performance if it's disk I/O, right?
Yeah, it connects to like the Dropbox API, and I think that's where the wonkiness is. I think it's like the communication with Dropbox, because it's not actually talking to my local file
Using
system.
OwnCloud to manage Dropbox?
Well, so here's what I was thinking. Is move everything into OwnCloud and then have maybe if I have a few things still remaining on Dropbox, a few things still on Google Drive, OwnCloud pulls them all into one spot, But as soon as I connected it to anything that had a lot of stuff, like Google Drive or Dropbox, as soon as I made that connection, like the whole UI was totally unusable. It just totally took a dump. But I'm watching
With a lot of files, it's probably making too many API calls. It probably needs some streamlining there.
Yeah. Yeah, but they're working on note-taking applications that integrate with OwnCloud. There's a lot of stuff coming down the road with OwnCloud, and it's got mobile apps. So
yeah, I got sidetracked, but I was still looking at building an OwnCloud hosted solution.
That's right.
It's like, pay me a little money, and you get OwnCloud in a jail with a ZFS data set.
See, that's what I'm talking about. Because sometimes I'm thinking I'm building up Fortress Fisher here at my house with all this stuff, and then it's like, what happens?
Well, for you, yes. Depending how things go, we were kind of looking at one of these super micro chassis. It's got 36 hard drives in it.
Ooh.
Putting that in that co-location in Oregon.
Oh, that would be nice.
We got the 10 gigabit connection there.
Yep, I'm in. Man, if things got rough, I'd just jump in the truck and drive down there.
Yeah.
Just take a few hours. All right, well, we got more emails coming up in the second show that we'll be recording today. But if you'd like to get your email in, email us, techsnap@jupiterbroadcasting.com, or pop the contact link at the top of our website and choose TechSNAP in the drop-down, or even better, start a thread in our subreddit. That way I don't have to copy and paste it into a Slexi document. I put out the call for emails for this show. while we've been recording, the emails are coming in. Like people send
Yes,
them. Like,
I love
after
how
we
people
started.
are like, "Oh,
Yeah.
you needed an email for this week. Let me send it after the show starts."
Yeah. So that didn't quite work. That just means we'll have a bunch of good emails when we come back for episode 130 in 2 weeks. And we also have some good ones for 129 now. That's good too. All right, Alan, with the feedback all done, that means it's time for the TechSNAP Roundup. It's time for the TechSNAP Roundup. Yeah, that's what that crazy music means. Now, the Roundup are stories that didn't quite fit at the top of the show, but we still wanted to give you some links so you can read them all on your own after the show. Maybe even the majority this week were supplied by our subreddit over at links.techsnap.tv. Often, they're supplied by Alan, and often, they're supplied by me. It's kind of a mix, but this week was a lot from the subreddit. So I thought, we've been poking fun at the iPhone 5S and the Touch ID, and is it hacked yet? I wanted to pay respect in the one way that Apple does manage to impress me every time they do an iOS update, and that is how they dominate the internet and all of the content distribution networks, at least Akamai's, for the couple of days around the release. So I just pulled
it's like iOS 7 requires 3.5 gigabytes of free space on your device.
Yeah, and it's like a 1.2 gigabyte download or something, or 1.3.
Yeah, that's a big download.
And there's a lot of iOS
features. That's a full Netflix HD movie, not standard def HD.
And what's sort of like the gotcha is it's not just the OS, and this is what the first article shows is pre-iOS updates, there's this big ramp up of apps that are getting ready for the new OS that all have to be distributed.
So they push updates to make their app compatible with iOS 7 before people install iOS 7, so the app's not broke when they upgrade.
So Sand Divine started tracking this. They noticed when Apple flipped the switch to allow the new iOS 7 compatible apps, that their Edge network devices just started to get slammed. Now, as is tradition on the networking subreddit of Reddit, the guys there that run a bunch of different spots and corporate networks and things like that also began posting their bandwidth graphs. One of them was titled like, "I run a 10 gig connection and we maxed it out all day." I mean, just unbelievable stats in here. Like the iOS 7 distribution, some people reported it caused school networks to go offline and outages at the wireless networks are deactivated due to congestion. It's just really funny because it
seems like some traffic shaping would be in order there.
Well, you know what they need to do is they just need to fragment their operating system a little more like Google does. That way not all their users update at once.
Well, they could just do an offset, right?
Yeah.
Just
roll it out like Microsoft
over
does.
the course of 2 weeks, right? If you take the MD5 hash of your device ID or something, or anything like that, you break it up into 16 buckets.
Right. Well, Microsoft does stage
even
deployments.
It's like a serial number or something, right? The device IDs. Anyway, if you look at like the last digit, and if it's a 0, you update on Sunday. If it's a 1, you update on Monday. If it's a 2, on Tuesday or whatever, and just spread it out a little bit.
And to their credit, I think they do delay like all the people who update from the desktop, like tethered via iTunes. Like all of those people were like delayed by a day. And
well, you would think people doing it from the desktop should have priority over people doing it over Wi-Fi and like over the air.
I don't get how it works. I don't know how it works. And they also pushed out a new iTunes, so it's just a ton of data. So a lot of good threads online.
Like it kind of makes you think of like when games have a big update like this, they usually do like pre-staging. So if you have iTunes, you can have it like download it the week before, so that when they push over the release button, you can just hook up your iPhone and get it off your hard drive.
It's funny. I think it was. I can't remember the number he used, but Gabe was talking about when Steam distributes Dota 2 updates. Like at any given time when the update's just been pushed, like this might be the wrong number, but like it was 3 to 4% of all of the internet traffic was for Steam servers distributing the Dota 2 update.
Right.
So and because people don't talk about this, but as more and more of this stuff is distributed, I mean, Apple releases their operating systems via the store. Microsoft's doing that with Windows 8, Steam. I mean, all of this stuff goes online. Akamai and all those guys just get totally slammed. We mentioned it earlier, just while we're talking about the iOS stuff. A hacker crowdfund bounty to hack the iPhone 5S fingerprint reader.
Touch ID or whatever it's called.
It started on Twitter.
I had an interesting one. There was somebody had a traffic graph from the like analytics engine at Apple, where it showed traffic levels of just people visiting apple.com, and it showed the spike that they had, but the tweet got taken down. and I didn't think to save the image locally.
Man, God forbid Apple share any kind of information.
Yeah, somebody got in trouble for that.
Speaking of companies who deliver massive amounts of data on a regular basis, Netflix. Netflix's executive said, and I put this in here because I wanted to get your take on this, Alan, Canada's broadband caps are almost a human rights violation. What do you think about that?
Yeah. Well, yeah, a lot of the ISPs here limit the total amount you can download in a month.
15 gigabytes is one of them.
Like mine's 500, so I'm not as in a situation like that.
So
but
this
when it
one's
was 50,
Shaw.
I actually ran into it. Shaw?
50? Oh,
no,
man.
I have Shaw. Mine's 500, but I have a more expensive connection. But the 15 is only if you have like the grandma who only does email package.
Right.
Like their super cheap one.
But maybe somebody got her Netflix for Christmas, and all of a sudden she hit her cap.
Yep. Well, the worst part is when you do hit the cap, when they're like, yeah, it's $1 a gigabyte or something after that.
Spazzy C's right. This is totally a first world problem, but I don't know if I'd totally dismiss it because as more and more things go online, like, old people benefits.
Well, specifically, in this case, Shaw is doing it because Shaw happens to be a cable TV provider.
Yeah,
who would
that's
much
the
rather
thing, huh?
you didn't watch Netflix.
That's the thing. It's more about that, isn't it? Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Shaw just bought a bunch of TV stations.
So
and so they're really...
Is this trend
vested.
reversing at all in Canada, or are they moving full ahead with this cap crap?
The caps have gotten a little less restrictive, I would say, but yeah, it's an issue for me oftentimes.
All right, so now we got your first story in here, Alan, from The Guardian. Abandoned NHS IT system has cost $10 billion so far.
That's British, so that's like 16 billion US dollars.
Yikes.
So yeah, basically they were building this new IT system and then they canceled it because governments love to do that for some reason. Because of the way the contracts work, they still have to pay for a bunch of it. And the project was only supposed to cost $6 billion, and it's already up to 10.
Launched
Which is probably why they canceled it. And then, but it has always drove me crazy when they're like, yes, we have to cancel this because it's gone over budget. But because of the way the contract set it up, we have to pay for it all anyway.
The idea was the program was to reach 500,000 registered NHS users and support 25 million patient records. 3 hospital trusts had already successfully had their day-to-day operations using this system. Wow.
Yeah. It's electronic health records.
What a
similar
mess.
effort in Canada that's wasted a lot of money.
Go figure. Gosh, horrible. All right, so I got to pick your brain about this one, Alan.
Yes.
OpenZFS, the announcement was made on the 17th of this week. They're calling it OpenZFS, a truly open source successor to the ZFS project.
Yep. This was announced by Matthew Ahrens, one of the 2 guys that started ZFS, and I forget the name of the guy from the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratories in the States who spearheads the ZFS on Linux project. So the OpenZFS project is basically a clearinghouse for dealing with all the issues and ensuring that ZFS on all the different platforms like FreeBSD, Illumos, SmartOS, macOS, Linux, etc., are all compatible with each other.
Kind of in sync more?
Yeah. So, one of the main goals is to reduce the size of the patches so that the code difference between ZFS on FreeBSD and ZFS on Linux is as small as possible. Concentrating just on the stuff that requires integrating it into the Linux or whatever. And a bunch of things. Another feature they're going to have are what's called office hours, where some key people from ZFS on scheduled dates will have like Google Hangouts or be on IRC or whatever to answer highly technical questions for the people that are working on ZFS on FreeBSD or on Linux and so on.
Is this more about, because it's not a different license, it's still under the CDL.
Right. They can't change the license. Oracle owns the license on the copyright on the parts.
Is this is this more about, is this in a response, is this an Oracle response, or is this more about, hey, everybody's off on their own thing and we want to get everybody under one umbrella?
Oracle has continued ZFS privately now, right? And so they're up to like ZFS version 34.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So OpenZFS had to find a way so that, if they just kept going with version numbers and we made ZFS version 29, because 28 was the last open source one, if the open source one's upgraded to 29, and it wasn't the same as Oracle 29, that'd be very confusing.
Yeah.
And also, we don't want to have, a Lumos having 29 that means this, and Linux having 29 that means something else.
Ugh.
Right?
Yeah.
It would just be insane. So OpenZFS says, all right, for all the open source ones, we're going to go to version 5000 so that there's never going to be a conflict with the Oracle version number. And that way, anyone who tries to mount it on Oracle will be told that your ZFS is too old. Right? And then they implemented a system called feature flags, where it just says, in the metadata of the pool, it'll say, this pool supports LZ4 compression. Or this pool supports asynchronous destruction, meaning you can destroy a snapshot without having to wait for it to finish. It'll do it in the background. And then those flags have a subflag that says whether they're read-only compatible or not. So asynchronous destruction, destroying a snapshot without having it be a blocking operation, that if you don't support that, you can mount the Z pool still, but you can only mount it read-only. Right? So you can still read data from it. You just can't write to it because you don't understand the newer format for how the records get updated. But with LZ4 compression, you can't do even read-only because you don't understand that compression algorithm, so the files will be gibberish. But so it's setting out all these systems so that it'll make sure everybody's ZFS works together and make a central place. Because as far as FreeBSD was concerned, the source code repository of record was Illumos. I think OpenZFS is going to kind of centralize that a little more so that, yeah.
Gotcha. Very cool. All right, well, some good news for you pfSense users out there, and I get the sense that's a lot of you. Version 2.1 has been released. The release brings many new features. The biggest change, of course, being IPv6 support in every portion of the system, mostly.
Yes.
There's also a number of bug fixes and updates in general. And it's hit the mirrors. And I'll tell you, I've decided I'm going to... something it's on my to-do list for weeks and weeks and weeks. I'm going to cover my PCBSD, my pfSense setup. I'm going to do a walkthrough in this Sunday's Linux Action Show and show you some of my metric stuff and show you some of the config stuff that I've done. So
yeah, just don't upgrade till after, because if you break something.
I know. I was actually debating, like, should I do the update? No. I mean, I'm going to use the news item as sort of the point to jump off from and cover some of the differences, but yeah. So stay tuned on Linux Action Show this coming week for that.
Yeah, I don't have time, but when I get back from Malta, I'll upgrade mine from 2.03 to 2.2 or 2.1. One of the other big changes was upgrading the kernel from FreeBSD 8.1 to 8.3. So on top of all the security fixes that includes, it also brings a lot of new drivers for network cards. So even network cards that were supported before are supported better now.
Very good. That's always great in a firewall.
Normally, FreeBSD has the 6-month release cycle, so this is bringing like a year of updates into the kernel.
Oh, okay. That is a big change, isn't it? All right, so the question I've posed to you before...
And, the one other thing was, the reason why it wasn't 8.4, which has been out for a little while now, is that when they started building 2.1, 8.3 was the newest, and they didn't want to just abandon all the work they did and start over.
Yeah.
But we should probably expect to see a newer one. Actually, I think they're waiting on purpose, but the next pfSense might be based on FreeBSD 10, which hit Alpha 2 yesterday.
Rumors. Hearsay. All right, Alan.
It's on the website.
No, I kid. So let me ask you a fundamental question. This comes down to your core principles. Does a lack of moving parts translate to higher reliability?
Not always. But yeah, so we have an article here from Tom's Hardware where they found that the failure rate for SSDs appears to be about 1.5% per year compared to spinning hard drives, which is 5% per year. Part of that can also depend on your definition of a failure. Mainly the SSDs, when a sector goes bad, it just swaps it out with a different one. And the hard drives, it's a little harder to do. But also part of it is SSDs, when they fail, it tends to be a complete abject, you lose everything.
Total.
Whereas hard drives, oftentimes it's, the drive's just gotten to the point where it's really slow and it's hanging on trying to reread this one sector and stuff, where you can probably get a lot of stuff off of it before you, right? As they have a couple of interviews in there, one of them with a company that's mostly been using the Intel SSDs, and they had to the point where they had not had a single failure yet. I have all Intel SSDs, and I have yet to run into a failure either. I have some like Intel X25Es, the 32 gigabyte ones that cost $500 when I bought them. They are still running now, and they've been in since 2009 or 2010.
Okay.
When we installed them.
All right.
But they're at least 3, more like 4 years old, and they've been running heavy MySQL data loads the whole time, and they're still running just fine. And then we have newer ones as well, the 520s that are going well as well. Although one of my customers had a, I forget if it was Crucial or Corsair, some other more desktop-y brand rather than the Intel, and that one died, and it just gave up one day, and nothing was recoverable. So I have seen an SSD fail, but I haven't seen that many fail.
I guess.
Of course, hard drives, we've run into some failures, but not all that many, honestly.
Yeah, it does seem to be less and less as long as.
Well,
I've had spinning drives.
5% per year doesn't seem like that much, right? If you have 20 hard drives, that's less than one a year. But if you have 10,000 hard drives, that's quite a few a day.
Yeah. Yep.
And that's what it comes down to. You talk to the guys from was it Backblaze? They built those giant boxes when they make the drives not hot swappable, and they have to deal with the fact that the number of drive failures they deal with in a day is pretty high.
Yeah.
A couple of people's jobs just to walk around their data center and replace drives every day.
Yeah, we've heard the same about Google too.
Yep.
So I saw this one linked all over the web. I haven't read anything about it yet, but it's one of those headlines. The internet's just got to pass it around. A USB condom, Alan. What's this about?
Well, if you remember from DEF CON, they had that charging station, and if you plug your phone into it, it infected your phone with malware.
Yes.
So this USB condom is a little device that fits over the USB thing. It basically goes between your phone and the charging port, and only connects the power pins, doesn't allow USB data to go past.
Love it.
Although this can apparently sometimes be a problem with the charging speed. Some of the chargers that do like fast charging there's like some negotiation protocol where the phone says, I will accept a really high voltage to charge faster. Oh. And it might block that. I'm not sure.
So some of the Samsungs and internet phones.
Like the slower charging.
Yeah, but it'd still charge. It would just be the slower.
It would still charge, yeah. But, if you're using a charging station at an airport or something, you don't know if somebody's got something rigged up under that table so that you plug your phone in and you're getting malware, right?
But that is also the time you want it to charge as fast as possible.
Right. So I don't have the details. There was basically comments asking about whether it still works with the fast charging or not. I don't know if it does or does not. And if it doesn't, I'm sure someone will make a version that does.
Okay, Alan, I know about honeypots, but I don't know about honey docks. What are honey docks?
It's the same idea, basically. So the idea is you set this up on your computer and you leave a couple of documents on your desktop or whatever. And if someone ever tries to open them, you get notified.
Oh, right? This is interesting. I think I saw somebody recently posting on our subreddit that they had done something on their Dropbox account where when the doc gets open, they get notified.
Yeah, so it's a similar idea. So, it can be used in a number of different ways. Just is someone using my computer when they're not supposed to? Or, is my wife's digging through stuff she's not supposed to? Or, when you're going through airport security, some people say, that they're worried about their laptop being taken away and people snooping on it or whatever. So if they're falling for honey docks, then you'll get notified that they opened something that was supposed to be
This secret. Is a really neat idea.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, well, you're going to get to my machine, but I'm going to see I'm going to get you once you get there. So I accept that you might get there.
Or it's more along the lines of, I want a way to be able to tell that you were in there.
It's like an extra layer of logging.
Yeah. So the basic idea is that you can leave this in a juicy place and just see if someone falls for it.
All right. Our last roundup comes from Bruce Schneier, and this one, I talked a little bit about it last night in Unfilter. A new NSA leak shows that a man-in-the-middle attack against major internet service providers, including one of them was Google. Google had this happen to them. So I assume that Bruce is talking about...
I wonder if this is what was behind the big stride the last year or two about everything being over SSL from Google and Facebook and so on.
Right.
If this was their attempt to resist that.
Well, and is this the piece where Schneier actually speculates that perhaps it was the NSA that was behind Yeah, okay, here he says, another screenshot implies that the 2011 DigiNotar hack was either the work of the NSA or exploited by the NSA. So they took some of these certs from DigiNotar and used them to appear to be legitimate SSL services against American citizens. And they actually did a man-in-the-middle attack.
Most of DigiNotar was being used against Iran, if I
Right.
remember correctly.
That was, which also kind of gives some credence to the fact that it was NSA. Now, kind of...
Well, remember, we were like marveling at how sophisticated that attack was.
Yeah. Yeah. It was impressive. And so in the report that I covered last night on Filter, they talked about how they essentially went in between a group of American citizens and Google, and the people thought they were going to a secured Google session, and they weren't. They were going to an NSA server. So essentially, it's a hacker attack, right? I mean, it's a good old tradition. Now, he's actually gotten access to some of the documents. So, and he's now working with
the Guardian.
Yeah. So he's getting some good stuff. So it's been...
Including some of the stuff that's so sensitive they're not releasing it.
So now is better time than ever to check out his website, Schneider.com. We've got a link to it in the show notes. But, Alan, that brings us to the end of the roundup.
Yep.
Brings us to the end of episode number 1 of our double recording session. So don't forget you can join us live on Thursdays. We're usually live over at jblive.tv at 1 p.m. Pacific.
Which is 4 p.m. Eastern, 2000 UTC.
And you can also catch the audio version over at jblive.info. And if you're in, like we had somebody in our chat room who stopped by to listen for a little bit and he had to go mow the lawn, and so he's going to stop listening. Friend, take your smartphone, tune into jblive.info, put it in your pocket, and go mow the lawn with the earbuds in. You're good to go. You can still listen to the TechSNAP program on the go. Also, you can email us, techsnap@jupiterbroadcasting.com, or hit our contact. Just click that link at the top of our website and choose TechSNAP, or start a thread in our subreddit, and we'll watch it for a future episode. All right, everyone, thanks so much for tuning in this week's episode of TechSNAP. We'll see you right back here next week.